Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this session on perhaps the most talked about topic in the current environment today, hybrid work models. My name is Achyuta Ghosh, and I head insights at NASSCOM. If you look at 2020, it kind of triggered organizations across sectors to rethink priorities and reset their ways of working. In setting course and navigating through uncharted territories pertaining to future of work, leading to this transition from a full remote model during COVID to a hybrid work model. However, the implementation of hybrid work model, we believe, will differ from organization to organization. And this research study that we have published along with BCG lays out all the choices that companies can make to optimize employee engagement and organization collaboration. Nothing demonstrates this importance of this topic more than the fact that this topic today is at the top of every CEO's agenda. And this report, which was launched in June, a few months back, is already one of our most widely read reports this year. But let me get the experts to share their perspectives today, and how we will do this is that first the BCG team will share some of the key highlights from the report, and after that we'll open up the forum for a brief question and answer session where we'll take some of these questions that you post to the experts. Introducing the speakers for the session today, we have Amit Kumar, partner at BCG. Amit is an experienced management consultant with more than 15 years of experience in TMT, technology, media, telecom domain across India, US, and Southeast Asia. He has an MBA from IIM Lucknow, and he's an electronics and communication engineer from NIT Kurukshetra. And our second speaker for the session today is Pulkit Saxena, who's a project leader at BCG. Pulkit has over 10 years of client service experience in technology, media, telecom domains across India and US. Pulkit has an MBA from MDI Gurgaon and a Keenan Flagler Business School, USA. He's a mechanical engineer from Army Institute of Technology, Pune. Over to you, Amit and Pulkit.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate the time. And as Achyuta mentioned, this is something which we've been encountering across multiple conversations, and not just with our clients, but also the managers, the employees across the tech services organization. So what we'll do is that we'll actually touch upon in terms of what are the overarching themes that we've discovered during our discussions and our research, and then we deep dive on 5 to 6 one of them. What we'll be mindful is that we want to have at least 15 minutes of our time for questions in the end. The report, of course, is available, and obviously we are reachable, and NASSCOM is reachable for any questions that you might have. So we'll kick in. If you just go to the next slide, I think so. As we think about tech services, and this is something that many of you would have lived through, that there was a phase 1, 2. What we're clearly seeing that right now, as we think through a new phase in the tech services has started. And while there was a trigger of pandemic, but the way we work, the kind of services that are provided, the kind of commercial models that are being used, this is very different from the way the tech industry was behaving, let's say in 2019. It's not just limited to people, but what we see is that the broader construct of how the hybrid operating model works is very different right now. And what we said is that, okay, as we think ahead, and if we go to the next slide, please. What is the kind of preferences that people are actually putting forward? So we did a broad survey, and we went to a lot of employees and said, okay, what would you prefer? And it is not just that, okay, what would you prefer, but also why would you prefer? Not surprisingly, people say they want a combination of remote and on-site. If I was doing this discussion about 10 months ago, 12 months ago, there was a perception that people will want to have primarily a remote working model where they spend like 70-80% of people will be fully remote. But when we spoke to people, that's actually not true. Only about 25% of people say, okay, I want to be completely remote. 70% say, yes, I want to be in office some bit of time. What is most interesting is that why do people want to be in office? It is not because of the work reasons. People say that, okay, the community, social interactions that we get, the way we actually develop ourselves and develop others as well. For us, the way we actually come together collectively to brainstorm, that is something which has not been proven to be effective. So if you're thinking of a project, the initial part where a lot of thinking takes place, people prefer to do it in the office. And there's a part of development, doing the work which can be done remote. And then people come together again towards the end of the program. So very good insights. What I'd say is that what's very interesting and I really appreciate it is that a lot of employees approach this topic from a lot of maturity. They are not just thinking through that, okay, I will have to travel 1.5 hours in traffic. They're thinking that for them to be effective for their clients and organization, this is the right thing to do from a remote and on-site combined working model. What we also did is that we also looked at the other side. What are the tech services buyers seeing? I mean, because there is always a concern that, okay, will my data be protected? Will there be a good business resilience? People are concerned about a country like India. Will the electricity go off? Very, very interesting insights that many of the buyers, and if you look at overwhelmingly for digital and IT services, people are saying, I am okay with remote. And here remote definition is a combination of somewhat remote and part of it having access to office. It's only when we come to the aspects of, for example, BPM, you say that the figures actually change. In BPM, still a less number of people believe that, okay, they can do everything remote and hybrid model. They say, yes, we want people to be in office. But what is interesting is that both sides of the coin say, yes, hybrid operating model is something with, and we should think through how we can make it successful. If we go next, what we did is that what is the time series view of that? So if you look at the chart at the bottom, and we have been with NASSCOM setting like regular surveys and think what is the mood of the people. What is interesting is that in November, there were 28% of people felt that yes, they would want to be in office, and office is of course remote work. But in Jan, when the third wave actually hit, it actually fell to 10%. And then right now, as we think about it, our projection is that by September, it will reach about 50%. What is important is that this is not something which is cast in stone. The organizations need to be very, very receptive and responsive to what is happening in the broader environment in terms of societal, in terms of how people, families are behaving, and also adjust this model on an ongoing basis. So that was a key learning for us. If you move ahead, we said that we know what we want to do. So I think hybrid is a way to go. But what are the key challenges that people are facing? And many of these challenges, I'm sure, as you manage your teams, you'll also be facing. First is that talent acquisition is a big challenge. I mean, if we have 100 people in our team, continuing all 100 of them in a hybrid is easy. But how do I actually get talent in? How do I scale from 100 to 150? Second is that, I'll help the key ones, that how do I ensure that junior team members get the coaching that they deserve? Much of the learning and technology happens through the apprenticeship model, where the seniors actually guide the people, and there's small nudges, maybe like 5 or 10 times a day, they will guide, okay, you approach the problem in a certain way, that's how it will work. How do we ensure that the effectiveness of that coaching remains in a hybrid environment as well? Last, I think so important is that we typically have associated at least informally a person working hard with the time that people are spending in office, right? That's a very old way of looking at things. Now that is no longer applicable, right? So it's a very important for organizations to think very clearly to shift to a outcome-based productivity metrics rather than a time-based quantification, which many organizations don't do knowingly, but it informally many a times. So to us, this is like a complex problem. We have, I'll say, solved the layer one of the problem, but there are multiple layers to it that need to be solved. So it's a seamless environment that we work in. So at BCG, what we said is that, okay, how do we contextualize the solution? And if we Pulkit, go to the next slide, we said there are at least 4 dimensions which are important. And very often we just focus on a part of which is how we organize. But we said the most important part of it is that how do we work? I mean, all of us work for like customers. How do we ensure that the customer relationships, how do we work with our employees and the productivity? Those are the 3 key aspects that need to be thought through. Unfortunately, it's not a standard answer. As you would see in your organizations, different teams work in a different manner. So how do we ensure that these answers are actually contextualized and successful? The second one, I'll say, is the most important, which is how we lead. And we'll delve a bit deeper into how the role of a manager has drastically changed in the last 24 months. But important to think about the leadership responsibility. How do we go out of the way to develop the teams and also make them comfortable? How do we ensure that the culture that the organization stands for is protected? What is also happening is that the culture is also changing. So as we speak in terms of culture of new employees who are coming in, they think of the organization ethos as something else as compared to the people who spend like 10, 15 years sitting in office together. How we organize is all about what are the org structure that we think about, what are the kind of ways of working that we think about. And last one is which is more tactical. For example, if our offices has bays and offices and cabins, does that need to change? The short answer is yes. There's a lot of other kind of office setup which is being proactively done by many leading organizations. Second is in terms of tools and technologies. When the pandemic came in, there were many recessions which were made by the government as well as by the clients. But how do we ensure that in the hybrid operating model, we have the same level of reliability and security that we expect sitting in office? So as you see, it's a bit of a complex kind of a problem. Not everything can be solved, I'll say, in 1 or 2 quarters. Some of these things will take a couple of years to settle down. What we said is that, move to the next one, that what are the key themes that we're beginning to see? And this came with about, we did a lot of surveys. We also did a lot of expert interviews with the industry leaders. We said that let's divide our observation into 3 parts. One is what is established. So we spoke about hybrid is the way to go. Team structure needs to change. But what is important is that there is a fair bit of experimentation which is happening right now. And a lot of people are focused on the fail fast methodology. This is where we would want to share some of our insights, what we have seen work, and what will it take for firms to be successful. What lies ahead, I'll say this is not something which is solved yet. Many organizations know in terms of what they want to achieve, but there is no single proven way to actually solve for this. Let's move to the first part of it, and which is where the most interesting part is that if we de-average the word in terms of the hybrid models, we see at least 4 distinct models coming through. And what I say is that the one on the leftmost is the fully co-located, which is where a lot of us were pre-pandemic. And the second and third, essentially, I'll say is the 10 to 85%, which is a combination of hybrid and flex model. But there also, there is a very nuance. One is that we go to office as needed. So the example that I was sharing, that if I have a project starting and the starting of the project, everyone will co-locate, we will discuss. When there is no need, we will go back. So there are certain kind of jobs which can enable us to do that. However, there is also a model which we are calling scheduled remote. For example, people who run the IT help desk, the people who run the operations of big offices. How do we ensure that there is a fixed 2 to 3 designated days the people in office, so that there is a minimum coverage of the on-site support that is visible? What we are hearing is that there needs to be, in my organization, there are and then try to fit them which is a model right for them. If I look at connected remote and fully remote, these are something where we as needed go to office, and sometimes people say you don't need to go to a office, you can go to any office. However, this is very interesting that only very few jobs actually are fitting which can be successful in a connected remote or a fully remote kind of environment. One interesting aspect when people were thinking about, and Pulkit, if you go to the next one, please, is that how do we actually work? So if you reflect back pre-pandemic, a lot of work was done in a synchronous manner. So people will start working together. There's a lot of exchange which is happening. What we discovered is that there is a asynchronous way of working. For many of us, it is something that we've already adopted. But this is where we need to start thinking about how do we make it successful? How do we ensure that our organizations, our processes, which for decades have been focused on synchronous work models, now also support the asynchronous work models? What we said is that if you look at the employee satisfaction, there are different insights which are coming in. People were saying that, okay, if you give me flexibility in terms of 8 hours, what I will prefer is that you fix the 5 hours when the entire team is online or in office. But with 3 hours, I want the flexibility. So I can maybe work for 3 hours from, let's say, 6 to 9, or I can do it. I log in at, let's say, 9 o'clock, and I just log off at 6 o'clock. So that's a kind of flexibility people are very, very keen on. The other thing that is coming through is that customer satisfaction. Typically, what happened was that you will think about multiple shifts that will be needed to provide the coverage. People are always thinking about what is the peak call load that will come in, how we need to ensure that we are planning our capacity basis that. But if you provide an asynchronous work model, that is something which can be managed much better. Sometimes even increasing the responsiveness in terms of people not having to wait for next agent to be free. Those are some of the insights that we look through. What I'll do is that maybe as we go ahead, I'll request Pulkit to take us to some of more insights that we have seen.
Thanks, Amit. I think one key point that we wanted to bring about and discuss and share was the evolving role of the line managers. Now, traditionally, the line managers in a services or a technology environment were needed to be present with the team and almost guide the teams. But that role is changing as people move more and more, or organizations move more and more to hybrid, specifically with different teams adopting different hybrid or remote models. We need to think about how the line managers will adopt to new management practices around motivating the teams, guiding the teams, and mentoring the team. How the manager is now managing expectations with the team and also upwards to ensure that the work is delivered seamlessly. Specifically, when new hires are coming in and the line managers were almost playing the role of hand-holding and grooming individuals on the floor, I think that role is changing as the new hires are onboarded online and also working majority of the times, depending upon the roles, online or remote. We also need to think about how the role of mentoring will change because we've seen organizations adopting community of practices, which is more mentoring the people from a skills perspective or coaching and mentoring perspective, whereas traditionally the managers are the one who were doing this role pretty much with the workforce. We see that in several organizations, as we said, what is already changing is the team structures, and we've seen that traditionally where we had a pyramid structure where the team lead was managing all the team members for a project or for a practice, we see the team lead sort of adopting a more horizontal role where the team members are now starting to report to either the heads of community or the heads of service lines or practices, and the team lead is more coming into to manage projects. So that role of the team leader is changing entirely in this new construct of hybrid or in the new ways of working. The evolving roles hence tend to be more about creating that mentorship, doing the people management in which you can manage frequent check-ins, you can have conversations and engagement with the employees in a more ongoing or a more fruitful manner, where team leaders are now driving more empathy in a more remote fashion, and then also doing a lot of topic leadership. With the new role, people are expecting that can we actually make the team leaders take on more work and do more of the individual contributor, whereas traditionally they were just managing the teams. I think as roles change between heads of community and community leaders and team members, we need to evaluate what is the expectation that we have from the team leaders around the actual work contribution that they make. We've seen certain organizations already adopt this changing role and enabling this changing role of the leaders as they already start adopting the hybrid work model. There is definitely a need for managers, and they're enabling the managers to create a sense of psychological safety, whether it's about treating employees or their team members equitably across their career management, learning development, and even performance management on the cases or on the projects. We are seeing that team members are increasingly contributing to being the administrative leaders and contributing more to the content versus just managing the team. And that's more because the teams are now remote. There has to be management around their time, their productivity, and the team members are playing that pivotal role. We are seeing those organizations or that organization adopting the community of practice, which is then coming in and doing the mentorship of the people and making sure that the skills are developed in the right fashion and their needs from a learning and development and growth is being taken care by the community of practice versus the team leader, which was originally taking that role. As we think about sustained unstructured employee engagement, which is also very critical, given people are now more and more remote, and organizations adopting that hybrid model. In fact, a few days back, Apple released their work from office or work from home policy, where they said it's only 2 days that you have to come to office, and their employees already created a lot of furor around this not being very flexible and into how the employees have been working in the remote setting. So people have to think about how do you drive employee engagement in a very unstructured manner that is very fruitful, still leads to the right culture that we want to build in the organization. I think as people move away from coming to office pretty much every day, and also engaging and working in their flexible work times, organizations need to carefully design how do you define the alternate mechanisms and structured and unstructured ways of engaging employees. There is definitely going to be lack of the face-to-face interaction that we've seen traditionally. And in that context, how do you drive the culture? How do you drive behaviors or subcultures within the organizations? Organizations need to figure out how do you align the brand and what we stand for and what the purpose of the organization is, given people are not engaging very frequently and face-to-face. We have to figure out ways of making those engagements and interactions stick with people when they're happening, making them meaningful, so that people figure out what the purpose is and really closely align with the purpose of the organization. I think leaders will have to accentuate and figure out the roles in this remote setting on driving that engagement in their sub teams and even in small groups, so that the subcultures and the cultures of the organizations are passed on from leaders to people who are there working on the projects, or even the new hires that are coming on boarded pretty much in the remote setting. We've seen innovative solutions being brought about by the organizations to drive this engagement. Connected@workplace has a combination of making sure engagement is taking place to manage attrition, manage growth, which is being driven at the same time of remote or hybrid setting. Organizations are taking meaningful active roles in driving this engagement, and we've seen given work from home, or the restrictions of work from home were lifted, we've seen organizations across the board driving a lot more engaging activities and almost a flood of activities for having the in-person engagement. But as this subsides and there is a new normal that is established, I think organizations will have to think about driving that engagement in a sustained fashion across the people. So this particular organization is that we have, there is definitely a virtual education in college where people are building that connect remotely, trying to create a platform where individuals can learn from each other and drive the learning and engagement versus the in-person setting that was taking place previously. Pre-COVID, there were several what we call as SIGs or social initiative groups, whether it's book lovers, locations. This is bringing in small communities together and creating a platform where people can come together and share best practices or share interest and drive that connect within the organizations. Again, an interesting case study or aspect of that connected workplace, where you're trying to bring groups which were, pre-COVID engaging on their own, but now creating a platform where people are coming together to share common interest and then driving the engagement. During COVID, the company implemented what we call as the connected workplace, wherein it was a very, very engaging community. And while people were at home and working in their own sort of environment, dealing with their own challenges, there were several SIGs that were created for regular activities, right? Whether it was hackathons or cooking or sharing, wines and drinks or music and events. There were platforms which was created which enabled these SIGs to come together and connect virtually and drive the engagement of the employees even through COVID. So while there were SIGs pre-COVID which were more physical, as the organization, as we moved into COVID, the organization made sure that the SIGs continued and there was continued engagement of the employees and continued sharing of those interests amongst themselves. I think we need to think about redesigning of the workplace of the future, and Amit spoke about it. As we think about people working remotely, people working from their hometowns, or people working from the suburbs of the main cities, we need to think about what's really the need of the office, what's the capacity that's needed in the office, and is there a need for satellite offices that's needed to make sure that we have the right office setup, the right infrastructure to drive employee engagement in the office. This shift to hybrid will make several organizations what the design of the office should look like, and also what's the actual physical space that is needed across different cities to support their employees. We've seen organizations do a lot more activity-based workplace, wherein people coming into office, or people feel enthused to come into office to drive those activities. Creating more space for people to come and collaborate freely, versus having designated offices or desks which were needed traditionally. We've seen neighborhood work zones being created by organizations. Organizations thinking that there is a concentration of employees that originated from tier 2 towns, and having had moved to the cities pre-COVID, during COVID were in the tier 2 towns, and maybe that's the city where you need some neighborhood work zones where people can come together and collaborate and still support their families or their personal choices of being in their hometowns. We've seen more immersive experiences for the employees, which is being created for them to get enthused to come to office, and when not in office, engage with all the team members actively. So we've seen immersive workspaces being created as well to support the hybrid work models. We've seen, and just to take on the example of the activity-based workplace, even within the office, we are seeing organizations redesign the entire workspace specifically for new offices coming up. I think there's a new thinking around how do we structure and design the office, which is more engaging and meaningful, and has drives people to come to office and make sure that they want to come to office, especially when they're around, right? We've seen focus zones being created where people can quietly work, brainstorm, and think, which is what they were probably doing at home. We've seen more collaboration zones being created or thought about in office spaces, where when people are coming together as teams, they get to collaborate versus working in their own silos. We've seen work cafes, which is driving meaningful engagements or conversations for work, while people enjoy their coffee, or it's more casual workplace to collaborate and drive more ideas. We've seen wellness zones being come up in offices because people have been used to or getting used to taking breaks or doing things other than work during those work hours. There's obviously organizations making sure that it was not just the COVID that supported the work offices or the home offices. They're continuing to engage in making sure that in this hybrid setting, the home office is as good as the home office infrastructure is as good as the office infrastructure, and making sure the employees are getting the right ergonomically supported equipment and furnitures and even technology that enables them to connect effectively from home. So we've seen a combination of things being brought about as we think about this new workplace, which is a combination of the office and the home. And again, leading players are already enabling this. A multinational IT services consulting company thought about their new workplace as a combination of workflows, and work culture. So they designed the entire workplace around those 4 pillars. In the hybrid work model, they made sure that people were able to connect and collaborate. So they made sure that the workplace was seeing the shift from just delivering work, sitting at your desk, to more collaborative place where people were coming together and delivering this. There were different tools that were planned and rolled out to across offices. So it was not just the conference room being equipped for you to connect on Zoom, but also making sure that people were able to seamlessly connect, whether at home or having those hubs to go and then connect with their clients seamlessly. And again, there was support that was given to team members, to team leaders, to make sure that they were able to cascade these tools and technologies to their teams so that they can connect seamlessly and make sure that the workplace was thought of in a way that people feel seamless between working from home or working remote to working in office, and every technology equipment works seamlessly for them. So a lot of thought has gone in already by organizations about thinking of this workplace of the future. Amit would just pass on for the next section.
Absolutely. I think so. Few of the things that we spoke about is the importance of culture. But the way we were thinking about is that culture is, for example, a chain, right? And the chain knows how it needs to behave. What is happening is that with the kind of attrition we've seen in the last about 12, 18 months, at given point in time, I think right now, anywhere between 60% of employees in organizations have joined after the pandemic started. So how do we ensure that what we stand for as the culture is something that is consistent? That is number one. Second is it is aligned to the ethos and the vision of the organization. So what we say is that if you go to the next slide, please. There are like couple of things which are very, very important. The first is that, and this is where a central push is required to say, what is the articulation of my culture, right? What do I need to stand for and how does it manifest? So for example, if I have a culture of being, let's say, respectful of each other's time, as a respect as an individual, how do we ensure that all the leaders, all the people are on time for every meeting? That's just one way. Second is that how do we ensure that we call for meetings only when it is absolutely required? We don't have a 1 hour meeting, we keep, let's say, a 25-minute meeting, right? So those are the kind of, I'll say, rituals, or what is the manifestation that needs to be very crystal clear, that needs to be pushed centrally. Second is that as we think about the activation, walking the talk, right from the top is very, very important. People will learn as people start collaborating, coming to office, doing a hybrid. They will want to say that this is my aspirational day-to-day culture that I want to embed not just in my formal interactions, but if there's a special interest group, I also bring that same kind of culture to that as well. Lastly, very importantly, is the embedding into the way we assess a person. So it is not just all about the utilization, the ratings. We also speak about that, okay, how do we ensure that I value the people who respect each other. I value the people who are very considerate about the needs, who are empathetic. So some of the examples I'm sharing in terms of what the culture can mean beyond the usual thing that, okay, I want to be number one in this particular field as well. And as we thought about it, we were speaking, if you go to the next slide, we were speaking with one of the leading organizations. They said that our culture is actually evolving. And we are very comfortable with that. So it is not that, okay, we want to be cast in stone, but what we want to do is that we want to develop a trust-based culture. What we say is that there is a boundary condition that we draw. And after that, we have created a rituals framework. So what that means is that how do they actually run their program? When a new project comes, what is the role of the first line managers? They will very clearly articulate that this is the way we will work. These are the working hours. This is what we will not do is equally important. Second is that how do we ensure that this societal connect, that is key part of the culture, is maintained. This is where we are seeing a lot of challenges come through. For new employees, they have to be pulled into the culture of an organization. This is where the rituals framework is also coming quite handy, where people don't have to think through. They provide, okay, these are the kind of events you can do. This is a set format. There's a team that can help you do that event. And the benefits are for a lot of managers to see in terms of the engagement that we see. Again, just re-emphasizing, culture is not something which will be consistent across organizations. So this is a unique answer that each organization is looking through, but very important to have some method to the madness so that there is a discovery of new culture. And then second, there is an embedment of the new culture across the organization. This is a key risk that we see. A lot of leading organizations, if they're not very thoughtful of this, they might not be able to deliver the superlative performance that they have delivered in the past. If we move ahead, I'll just cover maybe two more quick points, and we will definitely want to have some good time for discussions as well. So Pulkit, if you move to the next slide, please. One of the key questions that is coming through is that in a hybrid model, if there are two people who are sitting in office with the manager, there are two people who are sitting remotely, right? How do I ensure that there's an equitable employee experience? This is something where people are concerned about. Till 6 months back, people will not speak about it, but today people are very, very vocal about it. And it is manifesting across range of activities. And if we go to the next slide, the first one is that in a collaborative environment, the people who are in the room obviously get a higher share of time to contribute to a discussion. That's a natural, we've all seen that play out that way. How do I ensure that even remote participants have equal view in terms of what thought process they are driving? In terms of productivity, many people feel that, okay, if I am more productive working alone in a closed room in my home office, why do I need to come to office? And is somebody who's coming to office seen as a more sincere employee? That's a big question that is coming through. The third question that is coming through is that how will the performance management change? Because performance management a lot of times is based on the input coming from the managers. So this is a key thing that focusing on that, okay, how do I de-link some of the physical locations and go from that to what is the outcome that is being delivered. For example, some of the tech majors that we see, the Googles, Facebooks of the world, are purely focused on every quarterly talking about what is the impact that has been delivered. And they will speak only about that. And what that does is that it takes away all the input variables. Where did you work from? How did you get the work done? They take away from all of that. And it's a cultural shift that has benefited them. If you look at the amount of innovation and the pace of innovation from some of those firms, it has been amazing. Last is in terms of the pay and benefits. I think it was about 12 months back, there was a proposal by a US tech major where they proposed that should we actually reduce the salaries of people, for example, who were earlier working out of New York, but now working out of smaller towns because they are spending less on rent, the expenses are less, and the answer was very, very clear, no. But organizations are also thinking through that, okay, is it something which we need to differentiate, not differentiate? And do we need to give something extra or less to people who are in hybrid versus remote to fully in office? Not solved yet. As I said, this is something which is being experimented. There is no one clear answer which is solved for everything on this page, but this is something which will have to be solved for. There will be no answer be like a clear yes, okay, this is all solved, but important to find out what best we can do in the next 6 months, and after that in the 1 to 2 years. As we just reflect back on when we started, we said this is a new phase of tech industry which has started, and tech industry is based by the people capital, and this is what impacts our people, our employees the most. I just cover a last point in terms of a key shift that we are seeing, and I'm sure you would be listening a lot about, is that the gig workforce. A lot of focus on gig workforce for the past couple of years had been on standard repeatable tasks, right? I mean, we see a lot of aggregators going to gig workforce, a lot of people saying, okay, something which is, for example, electrician work or somebody who's doing that, that has changed today. People are now thinking about that. How can knowledge-driven professions also be adopting gig workforce? There are many examples of people who are doing, you would have seen and heard stories of how people are actually no longer deployed or employed with one particular organizations. In fact, they're doing the gig kind of work across 3 or 4 organizations and actually earning much, much more. The important part is that for any big organizations, this is an opportunity. But how do we embed a gig workforce into your core model is not something which has been solved for. Specific things that come into the picture is that how do you actually ensure the quality of the output? How do we ensure that the kind our own employees are working, we have a same expectation, or should we have a different expectation? The second thing that happens is that from a regulatory and compliance perspective, there are many laws that are local, and it becomes a very complex maze for any organization to actually manage. And last but not the least is that if I have a work package of, let's say, 100 items that need to be delivered, how do I ensure that these are the 5 which I can give to a gig team member versus the rest of 95 which has to be done internally? There is no single way of actually defining it. There's something many organizations are doing one by one. But as we speak in some of the discussion, we'll be very eager to actually hear, have you tried and what have your learnings been on this? So that is what we had on Pulkit. We can just go to the last slide. This we covered, yeah. I think so. What is important is that the couple of key questions which need to be answered, we say, is that in terms of for different job roles, right? What is your answer for hybrid, right? For developer versus tester versus somebody who's leading operations, right? Now, what is the team structure in a hybrid? Do I still have the same span of control? Do I change it? Do I make the team smaller? Very interesting question. No clear answer right now. Similarly, if we talk about in terms of how do we organize, one thing we want to speak about apart from the equitable employee experience is that what is the employee proposition we are bringing in? I'm sure you would have seen and heard of stories where people, when asked to come to office, I have a better opportunity, an organization which cares for me, because remote work and hybrid work is also being seen as something which people believe that is organizations also appreciate my challenges. So there is a clear differentiated value proposition coming through for talent over here. And lastly, in terms of geographical footprint, a lot of tier 2, tier 3 towns, we have seen a rapid proliferation of a lot of tech majors going through. We believe as the infrastructure continues to improve in our tier 2, tier 3 town, this will actually grow. And it will further cement the focus of small to medium offices where people come together and work in a hybrid environment. So that's the some of the thoughts that we had. What we'll do is that maybe we can spend some time right now to discuss, and we'll be eager to hear what you have seen, and obviously happy to answer questions that we can.
So thanks, Amit, Pulkit. I think some questions are already there in the Q&A tab. I mean, maybe we can start with them, and if they have not been addressed up till now, and then maybe we'll probably see some more questions coming in from the audience. So if you just open that, the first one is around Indian laws around from Pushkar, which is around employees working from another state and whether work contract is are there any clear-cut laws around this?
I am not aware of, because employees that work, our taxation system is centralized. If we think about US, there is definitely a implication, because in US the lot of tax is Fed tax as well as state tax, and there is a local tax as well. So in US, it is important to think about what physical location you are working on.
Great. Then the next question from Sunil is quite interesting. What are governance dynamics? How are they changing in a hybrid work model? I think you touched upon it in your discussion, but maybe you want to dive a little bit deeper.
No, absolutely. And governance, I presume that in terms of how we run the programs, right, and how do we run the organization, a significant shift has come through. One of the key tenets of governance earlier used to be the number of meetings that we will have all sitting in a big conference room. That are slowly shifting to a position where a lot of data comes in. A couple of people actually develop insights from the data, and there is less number of meetings, shorter duration, but is all focused on what is the decision that we need to take. And people are saying, okay, I have a lot of data available. Now everything is online. Let's see where the challenge is, rather than discovering the challenge during a meeting. That's a key thing that is happening. Second key thing is that a lot of customers have a far greater sense of control and transparency in terms of what is happening. Because if I am remote, right, whether I'm sitting in the next room or next city or in next country, it doesn't make a difference. And clients always now believe that, okay, they have a greater transparency in terms of where the program is, what is the progress.
Sure. So the second one is around what Aparna asked, right? I mean, it's a tricky question. I mean, do you think it's possible to have one model defined for the entire organization, or does it make sense to let the team decide on how to work to deliver on outcomes? I'm sure there's multiple perspectives there. Happy to hear your views.
One model we have not seen to be successful, and that is something that we will not recommend. What is important is that there has to be a centralized push. So central team think through that, okay, as we speak about, there are 40 or 50 kind of in my organization. What we have seen best is that we come in and say that, okay, these are 2 or 3 models that can work for you. Let the team collectively decide and then choose that model. What we've seen is that a lot of employees are mature enough to say that when I do my work, I need to make my organization successful. I need to make my clients successful. And it's a good way to actually trust our employees and drive a new model.
And also probably allow flexibility. There may be individuals who may want to come in office and work, and they are staying close to the vicinity of the office, and for whatever reason, their home conditions or environment don't allow them to work from home, right, effectively. So also have the flexibility to allow people to choose if they want to just come to office and work from there.
Right. So there's no one size fit all for the industry. There's no one size fits all for the organization also. So I think That's the key thing to look at. The next one is also interesting, and logically it should happen. So with respect to talent management option, remote actually gives the opportunity for more diversity. But do you really see that happening over the past couple of years, or is it still, theoretically possible, but not really happening in real life?
It is happening. It is happening, and that is something which is, I'll say, playing on 2-3 aspects. One is like entire diversity, inclusion, that is much greater right now. What is also happening is that this specialized workforce, specialized skills, right, which were earlier difficult to get, let's say, in a particular location. Now the access to a specialized location is much more. So I don't need to be in a particular location for a particular company. In fact, we did a global survey, and it's a survey that we do not just for technology space, but it is like all across the sectors. It covers about 500,000 people. And maybe Achyuta, I'll just share the link with you in case people are interesting. We asked them a question that, will people work for a company if their head office is not even in the country they're residing in? They work for a company which has no physical office in India.
Yeah.
And more than 50% said, yes, absolutely. We'll be eager to work. So a lot of new specialized workforce and skills are being done. What is difficult, I said, is that to ensure that these people are actually absorbed into the culture of the organization, they feel part of the organization. That to me is the culture part is the biggest challenge. The operational stuff are easier to solve for.
No, I agree, and that kind of segues into the next question, which is around cultural change that Pushkar has asked, right? I mean, how do we drive a very simplistic approach? I mean, he's saying that employees often love to complicate matters, maybe with an ulterior motive of creating importance. But I agree with so many remote and hybrid employees. What's a simplistic way to drive culture change?
The two things that we've seen to be successful is that very clearly communicating what do we stand for, and not just focusing on big words, but actually tangible actions, right? Second thing that works very well is that the leadership up to, let's say, a mid-management level, ensuring that they live that culture day in and day out in all aspects, whether it is formal interactions or informal interactions. That will percolate down. Culture is not something which can be forced upon people. We have not seen that to be successful.
Yeah, but I think defining clearly what one stands for, and maybe having a relook at what your culture in this new hybrid model or the new normal is important, and then communicating it clearly, and then like Amit said, definitely following through. So even when we think of onboarding different talent types, whether it's more women participation or people with disability, I think if we are saying that we are an inclusive culture and we want all these people to participate, making sure that the people who've now been onboarded don't feel that, oh, we are at a disadvantage because we were never part of the organization before, but now we've been brought on and we are now being treated as second grade employees. People who you need to stand true for what you call for, and then follow through with actions.
Right, and similar question has also come up from Abhishek again, is that isn't this whole discussion on return to work, it's a pull factor, asking people to come to office, attracting, asking people to come to office versus attracting them to come to office. What is happening right now? Do you see that at the current action is around asking people, or do you really feel people are getting attracted to come to office and companies are running programs to attract? So somewhere I read that if you have to attract people to office, then maybe the office should not exist. But those kind of thought process is also there. Any thoughts there?
So I have seen very few offices and companies saying, being okay, this is a requirement, you have to be in office. The only ones that we have seen across is most of the manufacturing firms, where it is a requirement for people to be in the workplace for it to be effective. In knowledge professions, we have not seen. What we are seeing is making it attractive in terms of not doing it as a step change, doing it as small steps. Because if you look at it, there are people who are not in the location that the office in, right? For them, it's a big change to actually come in. People, and we were speaking with somebody in the industry, and they were sharing that they are being so empathetic and they're actually supporting the people that if you have to, let's say, move from, let's say, Lucknow back to Bangalore, we will help you move, right? We will give you a time. We're not saying, okay, come now. You come in when the session for your kids has ended, because we do understand last 2 years your kids were studying a different school in Lucknow as well. So that's the way it is. It's a combination of empathetic view and not essentially just pushing it. The second thing that is happening is that how employees view office is also being changed. As Pulkit was talking about, how does a new office look like? That is changing. People say it is not the same office where I just come to office and in a time of 8 hours, I'm only interacting for 2 hours. We don't want that. We are saying that if you want to come in, come for those 2 hours, have the discussions, go back. And for that, we are changing the office. We have a lot more collaborative zones. This is where you can come in and you can actually discuss, get the insights and go back. Third thing that is happening is that they're also ensuring that people, a section of employees also believe that coming to office actually helps them. And this is where I wanted to point out that the new employee generation which is coming in essentially is a generation which is post the millennial Gen Zs. They have a very different way of thinking about the value. They value the kind of outcome and the contribute work out of a particular place. But if you have to be effective, come here, work with your people, get the work done, and then you are on your own. If you want to like work in office, work in office, work from home, work from home. I think the major shift which is happening is that for remote to work, people have to change cities. And we have all seen that in the last 6 months, a lot of that has happened. If you one marker that we see is if you look at the rentals for the major cities in India, the IT hubs, it's an increase of at least 20 to 40% we have seen since Jan this year. That is happening because a lot of people for remote have moved back, and now they're finding a good model to go to office some days, not to go to office some days.
But Achyuta, I think the fact being that it is not that you have to attract people to office. I think organizations are starting to think, how does the office can be a place where people want to come on their own, right? It is not about giving people the incentives, but almost making office a place where employees want to come in and feel more productive and valued coming to office, having those collaboration spaces versus just having a desk to come and sit and spend the 8 hours. So organizations are already bringing that in their thinking.
For example, one of the tactical examples that we've seen is that for a lot of young parents, one of the key things is that how do they find good childcare, right? Childcare centers are closed down. People are saying, okay, if I have to go to office, how do I manage things at home? People who have elderly people at home. Organizations are actually tying up and saying that, okay, if you come to office, we have a childcare facility, we have a tie-up with them. That is something that you can utilize. So that is the way people are approaching it. People do realize, organizations do realize if they push it, then employees, of course, will not like it and they don't want to do that.
There was this big question on, the SEZ laws on the hybrid model. I saw that also as one of the questions. Any thoughts around that?
Sorry, I didn't get that, please.
The SEZ ruling on the hybrid model.
Oh, I'm sorry, I will not have a clear view on that. Yeah.
Okay. And this
What is working the best? It is also an opportunity for us to treat our employees as mature adults and say this is what we need to deliver, and we are equally responsible. Not just the manager, but the team is also equally responsible for making it happen. So that shift we are beginning to see, because what is happening is that the role of an individual contributor now is much more important, right? It is not just doing the work; it's actually delivering the outcome.
Right. And do you see differentiation in the hybrid model from a company type perspective? So, digital focused companies, newer organizations, do they really take to it? Do they have more clarity on how they want to proceed versus some of the traditional companies, or is it as a level playing field?
So there is some traditional companies which are making this shift. What we realize is that there are certain kind of organizations, for example, digital organizations, they don't need to be in one place. Very often they will not have a fully occupied, they will have a very small office, but there will be a burst of activity. For example, specifically when you speak about a lot of startups, when they are in the initiation stage, they're thinking through what the ideas are. They want to be actually in a place all logged in. They will actually have sessions for 12, 18 hours. And this is the ideation phase of that is happening. Otherwise, they will all be in different parts of India or globe and working very beautifully. The second thing that is happening is that from the perspective of some organizations which have actually scaled up in last 24 months are actually, I'll say, remote innate organizations. They have learned to actually work in a remote environment. They don't feel the need to actually come and have an office. So that is also something which is happening. They have a small office and they're growing. I'll not say these are some organizations which are very big, but we do see a lot of archetypes like that also developing.
And especially in the startup world, I think there are organizations who, as a value proposition, are communicating that we are remote first. We do have an office for people to come and collaborate, but we are remote first. We want you to be around. We may be headquartered in Bombay and have an office in Bombay, but we don't want you to be around. You stay in whichever place you are. We will support you coming in once a month to the office, make sure that you meet your team, have a good engagement, have a good meal, have good meetings, but then go back and work from wherever you want to work from. So I think that proposition exists as well. And of course, as the numbers of these organizations increase, I think we'll also see some ripple effect, some domino effect on larger organizations having to make those choices. Because if startups can offer it and make sure that they're seamlessly delivering on the output, why can't the bigger organizations?
Sure. And I think we are closing on time. So just any last words, Amit, Pulkit, these are the audiences or people who are from the industry grappling with how to address the hybrid work model. Any pieces of advice you would like to leave them before we?
I will just say one thing, the best model that we have seen, and as I said, we don't have all the answers right now. And I will say we will not have all the answers even 6 months from now. It's a new phase which will take some time to settle down and mature. What is important is that to be successful, please try and see if you can co-create the answer with your employees. I have seen that kind of model has far higher adoption and success as compared to, let's say, something being done by the central design team and being shared with everyone. So that's one thought successful thing that I've seen across a few of the organizations, which I thought was very insightful, at least for me.
And I think that requires a mindset change, that requires a complete reset in the way we have always thought about, work premises and employability aspects and all. So I understand that. I think there's one question that came in towards the end. Sorry. And what are the changes in international travel with hybrid model? I don't know whether there's anything there you could share.
I think travel is back with a vengeance in terms of the engagement that is happening, but the travel remains to be selective. For example, earlier the meetings which had to be done in person, a large part of those still can be done remotely. So I'll say travel is reduced as compared to the pre-pandemic, but do realize there are important discussions, client meetings, which are best done where you want to co-create an answer. People are aggressively traveling, and if you look at the some of the numbers of travel, you would see that yes, it is a good resurgence that has happened.
Right. I think we are out of time, but maybe Shrivani, you want to close out the session, and to all the audiences, any questions you may have, just write to us and we'll get them answered through the BCG team. Shrivani, over to you.
Yes, thank you everybody. I know we are receiving more questions, but in the interest of time, we'll wrap it up for now. I will request everybody to write your questions to us. You can always directly reach out to Amit and Pulkit on LinkedIn as well. And Achyuta, of course, is the subject matter expert from NASSCOM, so you can write to him as well. And thank you everybody for your time. Wishing everybody a good week, and I hope to have you guys join for the next session as well. Any leaving comments? Achyuta, Kumar, Amit, Pulkit?
No, that's
all good. Thank you so much for the time and sharing your perspective. As I said, it's a great learning for us as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.